So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are in the world. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night perhaps. I'm Ollie. I am the community manager at Stacker and general sort of no-code enthusiast. And we put together this webinar today because we wanted to educate people a bit more about how to get started building no-code databases specifically, because it's a topic that's talked about sometimes, but I think it deserves, a bit more attention. And Liam is the expert of such things, so I'll be passing over to him in a little bit. I'm just going to do a very quick introduction just to get us all on the same page. So a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, this is being recorded. So if you are watching this on the catch up, then you'll know that we've successfully recorded it. And I would implore you to ask questions as well. We do have the Q&A functionality in Zoom, but also the chat. Ask questions as we go. And I promise you, if we don't get to the questions during the webinar, then we will answer them async afterwards, because we want to make sure that all of your questions are answered. Feel free to just comment as well, if you have any experience of building with no-code databases. So I'm going to set the scene really quickly, just to get us all on the same page, because I think what a no-code database is something that you could debate if you wanted to, but to me, it's something that sits somewhere between a spreadsheet and a traditional database. So it allows you to store lots of different data types, but it has that kind of accessible feel that we understand from spreadsheets, that kind of columns and rows where you can kind of see where all of your data is. To give a few examples, you may have heard of some of these. So you can play guess the logo if you want. Airtable at the top left is perhaps one of the most popular ones. Notion has built-in database tools as well. Xano is one of the big ones that's the top right there, which only is a backend, so it lets you build a database, then you build your own separate front end for it. Bonus points if you guess the bottom left logo, Baserow. That is an open source version of Airtable that's coming out. That is come out. And the bottom right two, so Excel and Google Sheets, these aren't, databases traditionally, but what we're seeing more and more of is people using them to store their data and then using a separate app builder to display that information to their users in a meaningful way. And I do believe that databases or no-code databases exist on the spectrum of, at one end, you have a kind of traditional spreadsheet, and at the other end, you have sort of an advanced tool like Xano, which is kind of for power users to build like a really intricate database. And I think these are great for a bunch of reasons, but the big one for me is that it gives access to everyone on your team who needs to access that data. It's very easy to look at Airtable and understand the data that you need. And it also means that people, who are perhaps from a non-technical background, whatever that means, in this day and age, can build things like workflows and integrations and automations for the data that they work with. They don't need to go and ask the tech team to build something for them, which I think is great. It really empowers people to access the data and use it as they need to use it. So that's a bit about no-code databases. What's really important, though, is that when you're creating them, you need to make sure that they are set up correctly. And today, we're going to take 30 minutes or so to look through some common mistakes that Liam has seen when he set up countless no-code databases for the masses over the years. And on that note, Liam, I might hand over to yourself to introduce yourself and take us through some worked examples.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, I'm Liam. I'm the customer success manager here at Stacker. And yes, correct. I built, or at least helped build many databases and Stacker apps. So excited to jump into some of the problems that I see. And to be completely honest, problems that are mistakes that I've made. I really started as a spreadsheet user. And so I think sometimes we sort of inherit some behaviors from the spreadsheet that don't exactly map perfectly onto something like Stacker or other no-code databases. So I'm going to jump into Stacker itself, and we're going to look at some very concrete, specific examples that I've seen. If it's the case that, hey, you know all this stuff and you've gotten past these mistakes, then all power to you. That is great. So I'm going to take us through 3 problems, and I put these problems in 3 different apps which do different things to just give you a sense of different types of problems with respect to use cases. So we've got a job candidate portal where we're storing a bunch of job postings, and we've got candidates and companies in there. We have an investor portal which has a list of individuals and their investments, and we've also got an inventory app which is storing information about food products, so like the ingredients that are in those products. So we're going to start the job candidate portal. So when you're thinking about building, especially in Stacker, really the first step is like laying the groundwork for your app, which is really building a database. I think sometimes this step is a little overlooked. And the only thing is that if it isn't done properly, let me put it another way. Doing it properly really gives you the most out of your app. You're able to build the best layouts and make sure that you have great reporting and permissions. So that's what we're going to focus in on today. So the first issue that we're seeing right here, and perhaps some of you have already spotted it, but we've got a bunch of different tables for essentially the same thing. So we've got like Africa jobs, so jobs that are located in Africa, North America, Europe, South America, Asia. And the one thing you'll notice across all of these tables is that really they have the same schema. They have all of the same types of fields, but they've just been broken off into these tables for whatever reason. And this causes some issues, right? Like if you wanted to connect all of these jobs with a linked field to a company, you then have to create a linked record field for each of these tables, which is going to get a little confusing. And if you want to do things like counting based on that linked record field, you then have a bunch of fields that you have to deal with here. So I think the clearest solution really is to try to take all of these and put them into one. So what I'm going to do is actually just create a new table. We're just going to call it jobs. And this is going to be the store for all of the jobs. And when I'm thinking about, creating tables, I really think of a table as a single object. Like there's one theme to a table, and I probably shouldn't have other tables that have the same theme. So the idea here is that, okay, we want to have one place that stores everything that's a job. So I'm going to grab some of this information that I've got on the side here. And in fact, I think what I'm going to do instead of creating this table, just to do it quicker, I know we don't have a ton of time. I'm actually going to paste some information here.
Using the power of TV magic to
yes,
expedite things.
Exactly. So awesome. So I've got all my headers there, which is great. And I'm going to call my table jobs. Cool. So there's some work, obviously, that needs to be done here to reformat some of these things. By default, Stacker, when you import information, it's going to do its best guess to tell you what it is. So we can kind of reformat some of these things. Like, for example, if we wanted to, change that to a number field, we could. But the key thing I think we want to do here is just create a region field. And this is a field that we're going to use to differentiate all of these different jobs. So previously what we were doing is we were using the table as an object to differentiate them. But now we're stuffing them all into one table, and we're going to differentiate them with a field. So I'm just going to grab all those regions, throw them in here. And you can paste that in. I'm going to change this to a single select. And hopefully we can do that. Okay, cool. So we got all our options here. Now, like we've got everything in one, we've got it in a single table. So now if we want to connect this information to other things like companies, for example, we've got a whole list of companies here. We might want to connect these to jobs. And there's a few ways you can do that in Stacker. Like you could use something like an automatic link where you're just matching names to companies. Hold on a second. Let's see if you want to go. And you go automatic link. There are other different types of links that we'll kind of look at today. I'm going to go companies, and I'm going to go. Okay, jobs record. Thanks for seeing. Okay, cool. So now you can see that we've linked these all, and the power of this links is that now when we jump over to companies, we can see all of the jobs that are connected to each of these companies. And if we wanted to have a page, for example, where we displayed all of these, I mean, we can see these in a list here, and we can click through to that record, which is already kind of a leg up from the previous setup. We could put something in here like a related list, where we could show all of those jobs, where this would be a little tricky if we had a bunch of different tables. So instead, you know, we could build in filters here if we wanted to just filter by region. So that kind of concludes our first example here. I think the headline here is really when you're building your tables, just really think about what is the theme? What is the main thing that we want to track in this table? And as we're seeing here, these are really going to have downstream effects on how we build our layouts. So I'm going to jump over to investors here. And like last time, we're going to make a few observations here. So we've got a number of investors here. And across the top, these columns, we have actually the names of companies, and then we have a year beside these companies. And this is definitely something you might see in a spreadsheet, right? Where in a spreadsheet, you might just on the fly, you know, add a column for a new company, excuse me, and then have a, you know, one other column, which is a formula to just sum that information. The problem here is that we've actually have, when we're thinking about this idea of tables and themes and tables being linked to things, we've got more than one thing in one table. And that can cause some confusion, right? So we've got investors, we have companies, and we also have like the investment records, you know, between an individual investor and a company. So we might want to have some more resolution on some of those items. So we're like right now, it's great. I can see Teju, I can see all of his investments that he has, but maybe I want to get more information about a company, and I don't have that list. So this is really important to set up from a database perspective. And there's a few things that we can do here that I'll go through. So firstly, we want to break this apart into its consistent parts here. So firstly, we have investments, which is great. I think what we want to have is we want to have a list of companies, likely. So let me try and find that list here. We could have a new table, just called companies, which we don't really have a lot. In fact, think again, I'm going to do this in a slightly different way here. Okay, so we got Automator, Abacus, I think there's the other one. We have a company called Bicop. Yes. We'll put that in there. We could change some of these other ones, but for the sake of time, we're just going to leave that there. I think this table, we'll just rename this table. So let's just call this, instead of investments, we're just going to make this our list of investors. And in this case, like there are users, right? They're the people that would be accessing this information. So we want to have like just one list for those. And then sitting between companies and investors, we'll have something which is called a junction table. A junction table is just a table that sits between two objects. So we've got companies and we've got investors. And those investors have records of investment with companies. So we could create a table here. And again, I'm going to paste some data in here. So just paste that in. Okay, we've got our, and we'll just call this investment records, we'll say. We'll import those. So now we've broken this one table apart into 3 objects. And you'll notice like that's now reflected in the UI where we've got 3 different pages. And when we set up the links, people will be able to jump to company records, or if we want to set up permission rules between those, we can do that. So let's back here. We've got our companies. And again, just for sake of time, I've been using something which is called automatic links, which links all of these things together. But there are other ways to do that, just straight linked records.
I was going to point out, I think so automatic links are generally sort of a standard across more like the kind of Airtables and the Xanos. I'm not sure if things like Notion have automatic links, but like you said, there is linked fields are generally pretty common in most no-code databases.
Yeah, and in fact, like let's do that. So let's say investor. I know we have these placeholder that show the data on the left-hand side, but just to show you linked records. So we want to link these investment records back to the investor table where we have investors. We can create that table. And then we also want to link it to the company. So we'll do the same thing. We'll link to another record. We'll link back to companies. And so now we have these 2 linked fields. So it would really just be a matter of, finding the appropriate person. There's automated ways that you could do this. But the idea is that now when we link these, you can see those on your pages. So like if we jump into, and I know we haven't like cleaned this up, but if we go to Mark, for example, like we can see his and click into his investment records. We could click into the company if we wanted to jump into that company. And this is really it kind of makes your app a little more 2-dimensional, where users could jump between pages, where in the original model, we can't really do much, right? We're just limited by the schema. So I know we're running up on time, so I'm going to leave that there. But really the key thing to take away here is that, really one thing goes in one table. And what we've done here is we've just split up a table into 3 different parts and seeing how that can really affect the end result of our app. So the last one I have is a fairly short one, but I've definitely seen this from customers before. So here we have a list of products. We've got alphabet soup and raisin bread, potato chips. And then we have ingredients for each of these things. The problem is that we're limited, again, we're limited by the schema, right? Looking at this, we can only have 3 ingredients. And if we want to have a 4th ingredient, we've got to then, create another field, and that's kind of annoying. So like the other example where we sort of pulled those apart, we do something similarly here. The other problem with this is, from a, just from a reporting standpoint, it's really difficult to report on these individual ingredients. Like if you want to know how many, how many products pasta is referenced in, it's really difficult to do that unless we pull these objects apart, and then link them together. We can do that by, creating an ingredients table. We've got our ingredients, and then taking that unique list of ingredients that we're referencing, putting them here. We'll get rid of some of these fields here. Now we have this list that, like, one, we can maintain it, and we can also decide, which ingredients are available to people, like which can actually be referenced in on our products. And they're also consistent, right? Like somebody can't make a spelling mistake or something like that. So what we can do now, again, we can create a linked field, and linked fields are so important. I think, as we've seen across the course of this webinar, it really gives us that sense of being able to create an app which is 2-dimensional, jumping to different pages. Those are all facilitated by linked records. The other thing that we haven't gotten into is the permissions piece. So for example, if you only want to show ingredients which are linked to a certain product, you need to have those linked records set up to do that. So we could have one single field called ingredients, and we can link it to multiple ingredients. Okay. So now, like, this field is going to pool from all of those things that are there. So we could say pasta, tomato sauce. Get rid of this because it's annoying me. So we'll do the same here. Throw our yeast in there. Now we've compressed our table down to a couple fields instead of 4, and now we've made it so that we've removed the limits of the user. So if somebody wants to add more than 3 ingredients, they can just do that from within this field. And then if we want to do aggregate things, like maybe we want to have an ingredient count, we can use a roll up, which will just count all of the records that are related here. Let's see that there's a count there. And for example, maybe if we remove this one, you can see that automatically updates. Right. So, we've simplified the data structure, and then we've also automated in a sense so that we can really have real-time reporting on items that are linked back to these products. And we go on the other side and we see the inverse relationship. We could then, count different products or look up information from other tables. So I know we're coming close on time. Those are really the 3 key examples I wanted to show. And I think just thinking about those all generally, having a really tight data structures is going to allow you to build better layouts. So we're talking about that two-dimensionality where you're able to jump to different pages. You're going to have better reporting, and that reporting is going to be automated. And then having this type of structure is also going to allow you to build permissions on top of your data. So I hopefully this wasn't stuff that you've already seen before. Hopefully some of you have had these struggles and you found some answers here. But I'll kick it back over to Ollie for any questions.
Thank you so much, Liam. Definitely, like, all problems that I have, or mistakes that I have made at some point, and I'm still learning, I'm still figuring it out. Every time I make a database, I feel like I need to change it, a month later, or you keep iterating on it, right? Was that a real recipe for pasta, ketchup, and tomato sauce to make alphabet soup? Is that one of your favorites?
It's one of my favorites. Yeah, I know. I think one of my kids came up with that.
Nice.
That recipe.
So someone DM'd me to ask a question about if you had a tool, so we talked about a bunch of tools at the start, that if they wanted to play around with a no-code database, is there something you'd recommend, like, to kind of get started, just to sort of learn the ropes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously my biases would lead you towards trying Stacker and playing around in Stacker, being able to build a database there. I think Airtable is always a good place to go, right? And I think a good exercise can be, if you've got your data in something like a spreadsheet, just trying to pull that data into Airtable and seeing if you can represent it within that relational form. I find that's a kind of a good way to practice. But yeah, that's where I'd say.
I think the cool thing is, once you've learned one of them, apart from a few nuances here and there,
yeah,
you'll understand the next one very easily. Some of them can do this little feature, but can't do that. And, and some of them work, better with different structures and things like that. But that's the awesome thing, is once you've picked up one, you can kind of transfer those skills over to another tool very, very easily.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, well, I think since we're coming to the end of the session, I'm just going to say thank you again, Liam, for taking us through those. If anyone wants to follow up with us, I'll send out our contact details afterwards if you have any more questions about setting up your database. But yeah, that's it from us for today. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you at the next thing that we do together. Bye for now.
See you, everybody.